So a couple of months ago, the findings of a special study of grizzly bears were released. This was a study of grizzlies along the western coast of Canada in British Columbia. And the scientists set out to do a fairly straightforward DNA study of grizzlies, seeking to understand the genetic diversity in the population. And so they took samples, fur samples, from an area over roughly 14,000 square miles, about the size of the state of Vermont. And what they found was surprising, though there were some scientists on the team from First Nations or indigenous natives in the area who were less surprised by the findings. So what did they find? The study discovered that there were actually 3 genetically distinct groups of grizzlies in this one area, and each group generally stuck to its own territory. There were no physical barriers between the 3 territories. Each bear simply remained in one area. What they discovered next was the real surprise. The scientists noticed that the 3 territories of these genetically distinct bears mapped almost exactly onto the historic territories of the 3 local indigenous groups who each have different languages. One scientist who on the study is also of a First Nations tribe said this. She said, "We and the bears have a lot of the same needs, and it makes sense that we close to one area and we have enough resources to feed us. It's definitely in line with the fact that most First Nations consider bears to be family. That is something that we're very closely tied to." And Lauren Henson, who was the lead of the study, said that what they found is, quote, "an indication of how deep that relationship is between bears and people in the landscape and the resources that they both rely on." Now, a different generation of farmers on our land, for instance, prior to industrialized agriculture, knew this deep relational knowledge too. The farmer poet Wendell Berry from Kentucky has written about that old-fashioned term husbandry. And he says the word husbandry is the name of a connection. Old usage tells us that there is a husbandry of the land, of the soil, of the domestic plants and animals, obviously because of the importance of these things to the household. He goes on to say, and there have been times, one of which is now, when some people have tried to practice a proper human husbandry of the non-domestic creatures in recognition of the dependence of our households and domestic life upon the wild world. Husbandry, he says, is the name of all the practices that sustain life by connecting us to our places and our world. It is the art of keeping tied to all the strands in the living network that sustains us. Those of us who are far removed from living on the land in the 21st century, those of us who drive a car to work or buy our food wrapped in plastic and stay inside most of the time, may not feel in the day-to-day, the intertwining of our needs and the needs of all the animals around us. But our faith reminds us that we are indeed in that interdependent web of existence, whether we notice it or not just with other humans, but with our animal partners as well. Just as being in relationship with other humans requires intention and care, we must cultivate awareness of our relations with all of life. And I would say, especially those of us who are adults, we need to intentionally cultivate that awareness. I mean, watch any young child playing, and the deep animal human bond of partnership is so real and apparent. So often their play is about and with animals. So often they are in awe of the tiniest bug or the most common bird that we see in our day-to-day. But those of us who live with animals, who have animal companions, whether they're pets or service animals or farm animals, we also are taught something about the deep connections that can be cultivated, how we rely on each other, how those relationships can sometimes be the most satisfying and tender relationships in our life. A colleague whose father just died described how his father's dog stayed with him in the deathbed as he died until the very end. We know this, many of us, we know so many stories of how animals have been there for us in the most meaningful times of our life. The Human Animal Bond Research Institute studies that connection and the impact those relationships can have in all kinds of situations. Their studies have described the profound positive effect that having a relationship with an animal can have on everything from your heart health to your mental health to PTSD to autism. We humans are not set apart from the ecological systems in which we reside. And for some of us, this last year and a half of pandemic time has brought to us a deeper knowledge of that as we experience ourselves as creatures in relationship with other creatures in a different way. For some of us, this has been a time to simply be more aware of all the life around us, how much we depend on each other. The science writer Cy Montgomery has studied and written about all kinds of animals. And she asks, what have animals taught me about life? How to be a good creature. Just being with any animal is fine, she says, for each has a knowing that surpasses human understanding. Knowing someone who belongs to another species can enlarge your soul in surprising ways. And so today we celebrate our more than human kin by remembering what Cy Montgomery calls the wild heart that beats inside of all creatures, including us as creatures. Let us celebrate by paying attention to the gifts of the creatures around us, whether our dogs or cats or guinea pigs, squirrels and robins in the yard, ants in the kitchen, otters in the stream, or bears in the forest, or stuffies on your bed. Let us give thanks for those blessings of life and be moved to a more firm commitment to live our lives shaped by those blessings and protecting those blessings. In a moment, we're going to have just a few minutes of time in breakout rooms with just 3 or 4 people so that you can say hello to one another and say 1 or 2 sentences about an animal that is special to you. You know, we've started this UU Sparks creativity group where we're doing writing and artwork. And we did a free writing exercise recently. The assignment was to think of an animal and then complete this sentence over and over as many times as you could in a few minutes. The sentence is, when I am blank, you blank. I want to read a few of them to you, and you might think about how you would fill in your sentence as a way to introduce your animal in a small group in a minute. When I was young, you were wise. When I am sad, you comfort me. When I am weak, you are strong. When I was confused, you didn't know. When I mess up, you don't care. When I feel misunderstood, you seem to understand. When I feel alone and left behind, you are always there. When I am faced with tragedy or trauma or uncertainty, you are always there. When I am mad, you calm me down. When I play video games, you chase my character. When I am happy, you let me be happy. When I am on Zoom, you try to join the fun. When I am lonely, he licks my face. When I am hurt, he licks my face. When I am sick, he licks my face.